With the Siegfried event ending, this makes it the 22nd boxing event of Granblue Fantasy. There's been quite a bit of changes Side Games has done with boxing events that we should be shedding light to, because while the event does a really good job showcasing the characters participating, the approach to the in-game content for players that want to progress the grid is quite interesting. Let's talk about how a boxing event works. There's 6 chapters that give 50 crystals when you clear them, a couple of solo raids and multiplayer raids become available for the player to clear, which gives you trophies upon trophies, giving you crystals as well. Generally, once you clear the solo missions, you don't touch them for the rest of the event, because the raids that matter, people drop this thing called tokens when you get upon clearing. The tokens are important because you use them to redeem the various set items like pots, berries, rings, inside a set inventory, hence why we call them boxing events. Once you obtain the premier summon in the box, I believe you can reset the box up to 4 times. Then only after that, once you clear the box completely, you are allowed to reset the contents of the box to farm up once more. That formula has been a set structure of how a boxing event goes ever since Granblue released this type of system, and we should look at what having this system here in the first place does for new and veteran players. The weapon and summon in the event should be something to obtain, because as someone with very little to start with, it takes significantly less effort to farm the first 4 boxes due to the reduced amount in them, so you have all the incentive to grab enough copies of the weapon and the summon to get the max limit break. As you progress in your grid, the quality of the summons you get from gachas become better, the weapons you farm are of higher quality, and you realize the contents in the boxing events are straight ass, and you end up reducing them to get more powerful, stronger grids. Once you get all your grids to a decent, comfortable farming level, you join the club in 20 bucks, which I'll get to in a second. But once you do that, there aren't any real incentives to touch the event after that. As a result, the Granblue team has done a couple of quality of life changes that has been good and bad. One of the changes was adding a Damascus crystal from boxes 4 to 10. If you haven't done past events, this is a very good change. And this change was very accepted by the community. It does not punish players for starting later than the people who have played from the very beginning of the game, and it gives everyone a chance to grab the damage crystals later if life gets too busy for them. If you miss the event completely, it's no sweat whatsoever. You can argue that the change doesn't do anything for veteran players, and you'd be right to say that. But if you noticed, the people over at the Granblue Fantasy team are making changes geared more towards the newer and fresh high-level players. There are a couple of Grand Cypher articles and a couple Granblue EN Twitter posts saying that Side Games are making changes to make it possible for players to obtain their Eternals faster. Which, if you are a veteran player, you should probably already have a couple of them. 5-star. There is a change that makes it easier for veteran players that is quite nice and should be given light to. That is the ability to skip nightmare raids. For people who don't know, when a player does one of the multiplayer raids and clears it, nightmare raids have the chance of popping up and can only be done solo. The raid's HP is considered quite high for players who do not have a progressed grid far enough, but when you clear it, you get a good chunk of tokens. The recent change allowing players who have killed it in one turn in a couple of times, there is now an option to ignore it completely and head straight to the loot screen. What's so nice about it is that when people go to boxes 4 and above, it takes about 2,100 tokens or so to clear it completely. And having nightmare raids drop 100 is super nice. That's about 5% of a box cleared in one button. That saves a lot of time for people who want to try the 20 box. The reason why people 20 box in events like this is to grab the crystals, of course, for the first 20 boxes. Newer players, veteran players, it doesn't matter. Having a free 2,000 tokens become available for sparking gachas rolls, and even 5-starring in Eternal is quite nice. The downside of 20 boxing is only a small percentage of the player base actually does it. And it's so time consuming for people who don't have a well developed grid. This would be a great statistic to put up whenever Side Games does a GBF stream. Man, I eat it up. I love numbers like that. Please put more information like that. Of course, they would have to find a way to filter those numbers so that you can exclude the people who bought the event. But that's not something I want to discuss right now. For now, I thought this would be a good first video to have my thoughts on record. because there are a ton of things Granblue Fantasy has done without transparent explanation pissing me off. Hopefully I'll get to them all in time.